and welcome to Keeping Watch, Heroin in Our Community. I'm Amy Strauss, Community Relations Specialist at Henry Ford West Bloomfield Hospital. Today, we are at Civic Center TV to discuss heroin and its effects on youth, their family, and the community. Joining me today is Lisa Kaplan. Lisa has been in the addiction field for over 20 years and currently runs the Community Education Program and serves as part of the clinical treatment team at Henry Ford Health System's Maplegrove Center in West Bloomfield. Lisa also coordinates an elementary school substance abuse education program in the West Bloomfield School District called Kids in Charge, sponsored by the Greater West Bloomfield Community Coalition. Dr. Michael Feld is the senior staff physician in the emergency department at Henry Ford West Bloomfield Hospital. He is board certified in emergency medicine and earned his medical degree from Wayne State University. Chief Michael Patton of the West Bloomfield Police Department is also joining us. He's been with the department for 30 years and was appointed Chief of Police in 2010. He has a master's degree in public administration and graduated from the FBI National Academy. And Dave, a recovering alcoholic and drug addict. Dave is celebrating over 2 years of clean and sober living. He's a keynote speaker for Families Against Narcotics, or FAN, where he speaks throughout Michigan on prevention and the realities of opiate misuse and abuse. Dave, can you please tell us a bit about your family life when you were in high school?
Well, you know, I think when I give these speeches, I like to start off and I like to say that people would think that, you know, my dad was a drug addict and my mother was a crackhead and my sister would sell her body for drugs and to support their habit. But that's the farthest thing from the truth. Drug addiction and alcoholism runs nowhere in my family. I've traced it to every branch, limb, and twig in my family tree, and I'm the only one. So that's a big thing, is because most people will feel that, you know, it's hereditary and you're a product of your environment, but that's not the case for me, really.
So did you party when you were in high school?
You know, I think, yeah, I did. You know, but I did what, you know, what kids were doing, quote unquote. You know, I drank and I smoked weed, but you know, it was a lot different when I was in high school, because from what I hear of now that are going on in high schools, you know, I was just, you know, I didn't get good grades. I got really good grades, you know, and I was very involved, and I was a star athlete. So it really wasn't anything that was a problem at that time.
Lisa, can you tell us a little bit about how addiction really starts?
Sure. Usually it starts with experimental use, which for people who have addictions, it takes off pretty quickly in terms of getting addicted, especially with heroin and other opiate drugs. But people the earlier a person starts, the more likely they're to become an addict. If they have the genetic vulnerability, they're more likely to become addicted, although that wasn't the case for Dave. And with repeated use, people, you know, it happens to people. It is not something that people intentionally have. It's not a choice. The disease process of addiction takes over pretty quickly for people who are addicted.
Is it the same for someone who may be, you know, addicted to heroin than someone like marijuana? What is the difference?
Okay, well, marijuana is usually what people start with, alcohol and marijuana, and then it progresses on to other drugs. I will say that there are people who are addicted to marijuana. It doesn't happen to everybody, but it is possible. And certainly once they go on to heroin or other opiates, most people who are using regularly will become addicted.
I think that the biggest thing is that people need to understand that it doesn't start with the needle, okay? And that's the case for me and most people. And people, you know, I like to use the term, everyone hears the term is marijuana is a gateway drug, right? And the way it was brought to me is that if you smoke weed, the next day you're gonna be knocking on the dope house door looking for a crack rock. And there's a far gap in between that. Right. And that's why I like to use the term gateway process, you know, because it's kind of like the first lie you told. You know, you told the first lie, you get away with it, nothing bad happens, right? So how many lines in the sand do you keep drawing? So eventually, when you keep progressing and nothing bad happens, it's just, you just keep going. And that was the case with me, you know, just keep pushing the bar higher and higher, you know, and that's the process of it.
Thank you, Lisa and Dave. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll learn how Dave's addiction began and hear from Chief Patton and Dr. Feld about the effects of heroin. You're watching Keeping Watch, Heroin in Our Community. Welcome back to Keeping Watch, Heroin in Our Community. I'm here with Dave, a recovering addict, Lisa Kaplan from Henry Ford Hospital's Maplegrove Center, Dr. Michael Feld, doctor from Henry Ford West Bloomfield Hospital, and West Bloomfield Police Chief Michael Patton. We're here at Civic Center TV studio. Before our break, Dave told us about his life before heroin. So Dave, how and when did your addiction begin?
You know, I'd have to say, like I said before, it all started with just casual, non-harmful partying in high school. And then I think where it got to me is, you know, I met my girlfriend at the tail end of my freshman year of high school, and I dated her all that summer, my sophomore year, junior year, senior year. Like, I was gonna marry this girl, right? So, and I graduated in June, and in July she broke up with me. So I was completely devastated. Now I know it's reality, it happens. Like, let's just state some facts, right? But, you know, and I ran with really good friends in school, and then I had some not so good friends. So you would think that when I'm going through a tough time that I would call on the good friends, you know, and say, hey, I don't, you know, I need to talk about this.
Right.
But no, I went and I called, you know, my bad friends. And I said, listen, I just want to numb the feeling I have inside. And I went and I started smoking weed and drinking, you know, every day. You know, until one day it was presented to me to where my friend said, have you ever heard of Vicodin? And I said, well, yeah, I have. I was prescribed it. And he said, well, you know, here, try one, right? And it kind of goes back to what I was saying about nothing bad ever happening, you know, because every time we hung out, nothing bad happened. The drugs worked. They did exactly what they were supposed to do. And he had never lied to me. So I said, okay, I took it, you know? And instead of saying to myself, what are you doing? Like, you're taking a pill to achieve a high to numb yourself from reality. I took it and I felt completely different, you know? And where it went inside with me is where you can kind of stem from where the addiction starts is I said, I can only imagine what 2 is gonna do, you know? And then 2 progressed into 4, you know? And then it just kept going. But nothing bad was ever happening. I was never getting in trouble. You know, I still had everything in life that, quote unquote, made me whole, you know? But I was just numbing myself out from reality. It was just, now at one point in time, now here I am eating 35 to 40 pills a day, you know, waking up in the morning with, you know, almost my eyes turning yellow, you know, because it was just killing my liver, my kidneys, you know, and then it was presented to me, you know, Oxycontin, but it was still a pharmaceutical pill, right? So it was still written by a doctor, you know, or prescribed from a company. You know, I wasn't, you know, a down and out dope fiend on the street yet,
Right.
you know, and so here I am, you know, it was just that line in the sand, you know, going from Vicodin to Oxycontin, you know, and then now I'm trying to fund a $300 a day Oxycontin habit, and I don't think any kid, you know, at 20 years old can have the kind of money to fund that kind of habit, you know, and it just kept going from Vicodin to Oxycontins to Dilaudid, you know, and then all of a sudden someone said, hey, have you ever heard of heroin? And I said, so at this time, right when I was, you know, crushing up Oxycontins and putting them up my nose, you know, I knew something wasn't right anymore. So it was just to the point to where I said, well, I need to do something that's economically feasible, which would have been heroin. And the next thing I know, here I am shooting heroin all day, every day. Because at a certain point, it's not about, you know, getting high anymore. You know, it's about just like staying normal, you know, using just to maintain a level of normalcy inside, you know. And I got to the point to where now I'm committing crimes to support my habit. You know, I was overdosing all the time. I was in and out of jail for just minimal lengths of time at that time, you know, and I would get out of jail, you know, and then I would just go back to the same thing, you know. So, you know, it's just a vicious cycle, and that's just how it started, and where the tail end, you know, is, you know, I'm still trying to fund a hefty heroin habit, you know,
Right.
and the alcohol's there, and then you know, other drugs came into play as well.
So Dave, how were you funding this habit?
You know, I was by committing crimes, whether it be you know, petty theft, retail frauds, larcenies. You know, and I think the biggest thing is that it was I was stealing from friends and family, you know, because it didn't matter to me, like nothing, and that's how bad it is that nothing really matters besides how I'm gonna get high that day, you know. And it got to the point to where you know, I've overdosed so many times, and that's the big thing is that I like to tell people, is because people think of an overdose to think you're dead, right? And that's not the case. I mean, there's a fatal overdose, you know, but then there's to the point to where you're knocking on the door, and it came to me one time where, you know, I was shooting dope in an abandoned house in Detroit, and the next thing I know, and this was all told to me, is that I was someone dropped me off at St. John Ross Hospital at the front door of the emergency room with a note stuck to my forehead by a piece of gum written on a dirty napkin. It said, "I OD'd." I don't know who brought me there, who took me there, but someone didn't want me dying. So I wake up in this room with doctors around me, and tubes up my nose, tubes in my arm, and I said, "Oh my God, like what's going on?" You know, so I immediately took everything out of me and I left, you know, and I had enough. And 2 days later, I did it again. I woke up in the same hospital, probably the same room, same doctors. And it's so bad because, you know, these doctors, you know, they call my mom. They say, "Well, we got your son again," you know, and coming off another overdose. But this time it was different. You know, this time they said, "Listen, your son's probably going to leave again, because that's what he does." And they told my mom, "Listen, your son is not going to live to see the age of 24. Like, it's not going to happen. So you just need to prepare yourself, because there's only so many times that I can knock on death's door before finally I'm laying 6 feet deep." So, you know, and that's the big thing, especially with heroin addicts, is because if to normal people they say, you know, people are overdosing, people are dying, like, what are you doing? Like, stay away from that stuff. To an heroin addict, we're saying, where can I get 2 of them? You know, people are going to the house that people are dying off the stuff, because in our head we're saying, well, they just didn't know what they were doing. Or maybe they had a low tolerance. Maybe, you know, they did a little too much, or they just didn't know what they were doing. Right. But I do. It can't happen to me. So, you know, out of all the times that I've been in jail, you know, it would be 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 6 months, 9 months, a year. And that's the sick reality of it, is because I'd go to jail and I'd get out and I'd do the same thing. You know, nothing changes if nothing changes. And I was doing nothing to change what was happening inside. So, you know, I'm at home at this time, because every time I'd go to jail or I'd go to rehab, you know, I'd go back home. Right. You know, and you know, because I tell my mom, you know, "Listen, I'm done. This is it. Like, I can't do it anymore." You know, and then I'd go back out.
Dave, tell us about your mom.
So, you know, a little like backstory of my mom is she's a loving, awesome person, and she wanted nothing but the best for me, you know, and you know, maybe loved me a little too much, you know, but she always, you know, was at my games in high school, or my dances, taking pictures of me and stuff and whatnot, and she's also like a little borderline OCD. It's really bizarre. She has a storage unit in her basement, and you know, she's got, you know, all these like Rubbermaid bins, and they're all like weirdly color coordinated, like from the seasons. Like literally, green is like Christmas, and like pink is Easter, and orange is Halloween. It's really crazy. And all the boxes are all labeled, the contents of the box. So as bad as it sounds, you know, it would make it easy for me to go and steal whatever was in these boxes, you know. And I would steal anything I could turn a profit on. If I had to sell the ceramic Christmas tree, you know, whatever I could, I would. Until one day I went down there, because now I had since gone back out after I got out of a jail stint, and I went home, and I was withdrawing. And for people that don't know what withdrawals are, they're like the flu times a million. You know, your skin's crawling. You know, you're just begging for one more. You can't sleep, you can't think, you can't eat. You know, and all you need is just one more, just to get you to where you need to be. You know, give me one more, and I'll be anything you want me to be. I'll do whatever you want me to do. So now I'm in this basement, and I'm in the storage unit because I'm withdrawing, and I need to find something to steal to make me not feel this way. And I come across this new bin that I've never seen before, and I figured, all right, well, it's got to be something in here that I can at least turn a profit on something. So I open up this bin, and of course there's all these pictures of me in this bin, because there was pictures of me in every single bin in that basement. It's like it's strangely weird. And then, you know, I'm like, well, no one's gonna buy a picture of me, so I throw it to the side, and I dig a little bit deeper, and then I come across like some clothes of mine, you know, like a shirt and tie, and then I throw that aside, and then below that was a guest book, and then underneath that were these sample prayer cards, and they had my picture on it with my birth date but no death date, you know, and it was my funeral planned out in this box. And it was like the most surreal thing I think I've ever had to see, because it was just a matter of time before my mom had to get the phone call and just take that box to the funeral home and said, here's everything you need, like, just go ahead and plan it through. So, and you would think that seeing that would be enough, you know, and being like, all right, I can't do this anymore, but it wasn't, you know, because that's how powerful the drugs were. They just took over my life, and in seeing something that devastating, I just wanted to numb myself from it, you know, and I just kept going, you know, and it wasn't, and then all of a sudden the crime started getting more severe, you know, as I'm sure Chief Patton will attest to, that they just keep going, right. You know, and then now all of a sudden, you know, the petty misdemeanors are turning into felonies, you know, and then it's now committing home invasions and, you know, armed robberies. So that's, you know, that's what it was. And then to have to detox in jail is never any fun. Like, that's the worst. Like, they're putting you in there, you can't do nothing about it, you know. Someone maybe go to rehab and they're detoxing, and maybe the rehab will give you something to you know, lessen the withdrawal symptoms. They stick you in a box and they're saying, you know, there's nothing you can do about it, and it's not a good feeling, you know. But that's how, again, that's how powerful, especially the heroin is because you go into jail, you go through that miserable, miserable time, and then you get out and you go back to the same thing that put you there. Like, what's going on upstairs? You know, that's the big thing that people need to understand. You know, that you know, it's just it really is a disease. You know, a compulsion. You know, just to keep doing stuff. And the sickness of it is that this stuff is killing people. It's putting people in jail. But people are going back to it. You know, people say, well, why didn't you just stop? Why didn't you just quit? Like, just stop, you know? And I describe it as, it's like me taking somebody into a pool and holding them below water like 3 inches, right? And you can see the top, and you know there's air up there.
Right.
Your brain's telling you you're dying, and I'm telling you, why don't you just breathe? You know, that's how it is trying to get sober, you know? It's so hard. You know what you need to do, or me letting you up for a little bit and getting you a grasp of air, then ripping you back down. Like, that's what the heroin does, you know. and that's kind of how it went with me.
So Chief, Dave talked about how powerful heroin is. Is it really a big problem in West Bloomfield?
I think most people, Amy, would think that it's not. We think about heroin usage in particular, they think, geez, that's a street drug. You hear about people using that in highly urbanized areas, not a very affluent, educated suburban community like West Bloomfield. But we've had 12 incidents since April of 2014 in which we responded to specifically heroin overdoses here in the township. And of those 12 incidents, 4 of the individuals died from the overdosing. So it's a tremendous problem. At first, over my 30-year career, we've seen a lot of overdose incidents. Right. But the frequency, we noticed back in April, there were 5 just in that month alone. And I get calls on this after hours, and I was like, well, another one, and why is this going on? And that's when we started talking more about it. We contacted our community partners, the Greater West Bloomfield Community Coalition, and Henry Ford Hospital too, say, we need to get out and talk about this. And I think a lot of communities, they're reluctant to talk about it because it thinks, oh, it makes the community look bad. But this is pervasive in all communities. And if you don't address it openly and honestly, it's going to be an effect that nothing's going to happen, nothing's going to change. And that's why I'm glad we're doing this here this morning.
Absolutely. So Dr. Feld, tell us what you're seeing in the emergency department at Henry Ford West Bloomfield.
Well, I thought Dave did a great job really illustrating all avenues of how patients are coming into the emergency department. I see from the overdose who's come in, brought off at the front door, just dropped off by friends, and this is truly a life, this is a moment here where life is threatened, and it's an emergent situation, and really the tubes go into the arms, into the nose, and you're doing everything you can do to try to save someone's life. I see the individual who is withdrawing and is just looking for that next fix, is either very upfront and says this is what's going on, or was trying to circumvent the system and give me a whole different list of problems. But really, the end goal is try to how to meet these cravings. The rewarding one is the individual who perhaps has hit rock bottom and wants help, and is there and is truly motivated to get help. I'm very fortunate at Henry Ford to have Maplegrove so close by and tremendous resources, where if I have someone who's motivated and is really there for the right reasons, I view my job as how do I facilitate that and make sure you're medically okay to go get the help that you truly need.
So what do you do for a patient who comes in who's overdosed? What happens?
The very first thing is actually we'll use kind of a cocktail of medications, including Narcan, which will bind with the receptors that the heroin and the opioids bind to, and try to stop the process. In some respects, with precipitating withdrawal, but doing in the sense that I need to save your life. If someone is overdosed, it can affect breathing. Now that you're in respiratory distress, and I'm doing what I can do to try to save your life. If not certain how long it's been, actually we can put a tube down through the nose into the stomach and give some medication like charcoal to try to bind whatever substance you're on in order to prevent it from getting into the body. And then from there, it's supportive measures. It's keeping a close eye on you, monitoring you with fluids, with oxygen, doing whatever we have to do to try to get you through this really critical period.
So what do you say to a family who is there with their loved one who is going through this kind of situation?
Family members' reactions range. Some have never known this was a problem, and this is the first time they're being introduced to this, is in an emergency department setting. Some families have been through it multiple times and want to wash their hands of it and say, get what you deserve, in that sense. And that support system is fallen apart for the patient in the emergency department. Other times I get families who are very supportive and are really looking out for their loved one's best interests, and okay, what can we do now? Let's get them through this critical period, but what's the next step? How can I get them the help that they need?
So tell us about the demographic of the people you see coming in who've overdosed to the emergency department.
I'm seeing all ages, male, female, from early teens all the way up going through 50, 60 years old. There's really no way I can encapsulate who the person who's coming in who's overdosed.
So it really runs the gamut, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And do you call the police when you have someone who's overdosed?
I do not call the police. My job is to medically take care of you. I leave the law enforcement in the police hands and in Chief Patton's hands. But I view my job in the emergency department is to medically assess what's going on and really how can I help you from that perspective.
Okay. So Chief, when your police officers are called to a home where someone has overdosed, what happens? What do they do when they go into a home?
Well, we're initially dispatched because it's going to be a drug-related incident.
Okay.
The police are there. And remember, our role in the community is to introduce people in the criminal justice system. But that's not our focus when we respond to these incidents. We're there to support our police and fires, first responders. It's a medical emergency.
Okay.
You know, somebody is in distress. Somebody potentially could die. And so we're there to support that function.
Right.
And so we facilitate, along with our fire and EMS service, like getting to the hospital, getting them in the great hands of Henry Ford Hospital, and to get them the critical immediate need that they need. What happens next is an issue. And we look in law enforcement and we say, okay, our job is to arrest people, prosecute crimes. Sometimes there's remnants of drugs still left behind. Should we process that, collect that as evidence, and eventually initiate prosecution? As we've gone around making these presentations to different groups before, I've always asked that question. How many people in the room think we ought to arrest these people in this situation? And very few hands go up, because I think you hear the story of how dominant this is in someone like Dave's life, how much it just overwhelms every decision that they make. And they sit back and think, well, geez, arresting them is not always going to be the answer. But you speak to some people in that are in recovery, and they would say to you, sometimes the best thing that happens to them is to go to court, because it dangles that anvil over their head.
Right.
Because they go to the hospital now and they get released eventually. He talked about the vicious cycle that he's in. He's just going to go out and do it again. Well, where's the person that's forcing them in to get the treatment that they really need? Sometimes that's not always there if the appropriate follow-up doesn't exist.
Absolutely. I want to elaborate
go
on
ahead.
that is, the reality of it is that the person that maybe had dropped me off at the front door of the emergency room, do they want to save my life? Maybe a little bit, yeah. But the thing is that if I would have overdosed in that dope house, that means that all EMS, there'd be a melee at that house, and that drug dealer doesn't want to lose that business.
Sure.
So get this guy out of here, and I've known plenty of people that have just been dumped in an alley, and what Chief Patton said is, you can't, if someone, the addict is afraid of getting arrested. If you overdose in my presence and we're both getting high and I have to call, emergency response team, I'm afraid that I'm going to get arrested too, and that's what happens now. So eventually, hopefully, there will be a law that will be passed to where that it won't be a guilty by association, And also too is being, arrested, and I think law enforcement now is realizing that you can't arrest the problem anymore. You can't just. It used to be just get these people off the streets, put them in jail, and that's it. Dry them out. And that's it. But when you just throw them in jail and there's no rehabilitation involved in their sentence, what are you really doing? You're nothing but drying them out, and they're not learning everything. So that's why now you see a lot of, drug courts and, more in-depth substance abuse treatment in probationary sentences, because now you have kids that aren't bad kids, they're just making bad decisions because of drug addiction, And that's a big thing why I start off my speeches saying that I'm a drug addict and an alcoholic. Maybe not an active drug addict or alcoholic, but when you think of someone that is like that, you think of the guy that's standing on the corner of the road with the sign that says, we'll work for food, and are trying to get the next one. And it's not the case. It could be, your son, your daughter, your niece, your nephew, your grandchild, or whatever the case may be. So that's why, I think more now they're seeing that it's a problem out there, and how can we get these kids help, And when I was growing up, I had Nancy Reagan telling me to just say no, right? Like if someone offers you drugs, just say no, Or I had, DARE coming into my schools, with a 55-year-old police officer in a beautiful uniform that this man has on here, with a funny mustache, saying if you do drugs, you're going to go to jail. Clearly that worked out real well, right? Because look at what I ended up doing, right? So now when I go in these schools, and that's what FAN does, is they have, kids young adults like myself, go into these schools and speak to these kids. And I speak in a way and I dress in a way that they can relate to me, They can hear the law enforcement side of things. And they're not dumb. These kids aren't stupid. They know what the consequences are. I was always told you have two paths to go in life. There's the good path and there's the wrong path, So when I go in, I don't ever tell anybody not to do drugs. I'd be a hypocrite if I did that. I just tell them what I did and where it led me, So maybe, one kid will grasp on and say, oh, all right, maybe I can look at things a little bit differently.
So Chief Patton, what is the family impact that you see?
Well, it's much like Dr. Feld alluded to already. It's a wide range of responses. There are obviously some families that are very well aware of what their substance abuse issues that their family members are going through. David already mentioned that his mother may have been already making plans for his eventual death. So they already have a mindset that this could turn out to this could be the worst story. Right. So when the police eventually come knocking on the door and say something bad happened to one of your family members, they have some preparation. But other family members, they have no clue.
Right.
And when we respond, all of a sudden they see their son or daughter in a medical emergency and they think, my gosh, it's drugs, or they see remnants of drugs or a needle sticking out of their arm, laying in the bed, that they realize, oh, something's going on, and it's all very new to them. So it's a big shock, and they don't know what to do then. It's new, and they worry about their family members getting in trouble. I've often surmised that sometimes when we go to the scene of an overdose, sometimes we'll find remnants of the drugs they were doing, and oftentimes they're not. And I was wondered if it was the family members trying to minimize the situation by putting the remnants away, the drugs away, the drug paraphernalia away. It's still the obvious. We still understand what's going on. It's still a medical emergency. It's a drug overdose. But they somehow want to minimize it, maybe a little bit less exposure for their family member.
Chief Patton, can you tell us a little bit about the homes that you and your officers go into for an overdose?
Mostly West Bloomfield is an affluent community. It's a well-educated community. Most of the people that live in the community have jobs they go to every day. So these overdoses are happening in what most people think are very nice home settings. They're not dumps, they're not dives, they're not traditional drug houses like you stereotypical would think, or you see something like that on television. They're happening in everyday family homes in the community.
So this could be in your neighborhood, right?
It could be your next door neighbor.
So Lisa, what is the family impact that you see?
Well, I would agree with both Chief and Dr. Feld. There's a large gamut. For many family members, they're in denial. This has been going on for quite some time, and they have pretended that, or not pretended, but they have acted as if it hasn't happened. So we see people like that. We also see people who are aware that this is going on, and they continue to enable the use by giving addicts maybe a car, even though they might be intoxicated. They give them money. They give them a nice, warm, cozy place to live, even though they're continuing to use right under their roof. We see people who are getting help. They join 12-step programs like Al-Anon and Nar-Anon and Families Anonymous, which are helpful for family members to learn what to do in this situation. But what I find universally is that family members are absolutely exhausted and very, very angry. Angry at the person, not understanding that they need to separate the person from the addiction. They really love their family member. They hate the addiction and the behaviors that go with it. Right. Family members are stolen from, they're lied to, they're disrespected, they're mistreated in so many different ways, and so that makes them very angry.
What should parents look for? What should they be on the lookout for?
Okay, well, I have a list of symptoms that parents should be aware of, and this is in no particular order. A change in sleep habits, appetite, energy level and motivation, mood, personality, change in friends and activities, decrease in grades, job performance, unusual financial problems, selling items, peculiar odors or attempts to cover up those odors, presence of drug paraphernalia, use of eye drops, slurred speech, deterioration in physical appearance and personal hygiene, involvement in delinquent behaviors, extreme dress, language, opinions, or behavior. And then particularly when it comes to opiates, additional signs of opiate use would include euphoria. Opiates, we're talking about heroin and the other pain pills like Vicodin, oxycodone, just as as Dave described. Euphoria, drowsiness, impaired mental functioning, slowed down respiration, constricted pupils, itching, flushed, and irritated skin. And then signs of an overdose would include shallow breathing, pinpoint pupils, clammy skin, convulsions, or coma. Now, that's not to say that there are some drug users whose grades don't fall, and they continue to participate in their activities. That does happen as well, but they're not able to maintain it with opiate use over time.
So I think probably the bottom line is for parents not to ignore any of the things that you have brought up here.
Yes. Addiction is a progressive disease. It will get worse over time, so ignoring it or being in denial is not going to help your family member.
So Dave, what finally happened to make you stop using?
What finally happened? Well, before I get into that, I just want to elaborate on what was brought over here, is that my mother always told me there's nothing stronger than a mother's instinct, right? So I want to say my mom knew all along, but most parents don't want to believe it, you know? And I like the fact that you have to separate the addiction from the child. Well, because, you know, like I said, my mom loved me, but it got to the point to where she's like, she had it, you know? Like, you're not living in my house anymore. You're not, like, I want no part of you, you know? And when it got to me is that I remember going into jail again. I think I don't necessarily remember what the charge was. That's neither here nor there. But I was in jail and I was waiting to get classified, you know, in a line in jail. And I'm standing there, and this guy, he's probably like, I don't know, maybe he's 50, 60 years old. And he says, you know, what are you in for? You know, it's a famous question, right? What are you in for? And I said what it was, and he said, oh, you know, are you using heroin? And I said, yeah, I was. And I said, what about you? He said, oh yeah, you know. And he said, how long you been using for? And I said, at the time, I said, it's probably been like 9 months, you know, because you can stop, you know, but then you go nowhere really fast. Like, you maybe get a little bit of things back in your life that you think are making you a better person, but you lose it all really quick. You give it away. And he says, were you shooting it? I said, yeah, I was. And he goes, I said, what about you? And he goes, I said, were you shooting it? And he goes, shooting it, and he showed me his arms, and his veins were all collapsed, you know, and bruised up and abscessed. He said, I have no veins, you know, and he kind of laughed it off. And then he asked me how long you've been using for, and I said, oh, it's been about like 9 months. He said, 9 months? And he goes, man, you got plenty of years left. You still got all your teeth. And I laugh at it now. It sounds funny, but it's not. Like, that's, if I didn't get my act together, like, that was going to be me.
Right.
You know, that is what my life is going to be at 50 or 60 years old. I'm just going to be, and he was maybe 100 pounds, 110 pounds soaking wet and wearing boots. And so it's like, if that's where it's going to take me. That's someone that, you know, that I don't want to be, you know, when I get to that age, you know. So, you know, I'm just grateful that I was able to grasp onto things after that. And it was all, you know, all about change after that. You know, it was doing things that were against the grain, because what I was doing in the past to try to stay clean and sober didn't work, you know. So that's why I ended up going on a different path and, you know, and doing things differently. You know.
We're going to take another short break. You're watching Keeping Watch, Heroin in Our Community. Welcome back to Keeping Watch, Heroin in Our Community. We're here at the Civic Center TV studio, where we've been discussing the effects heroin can have not only on those using the drug, but also the families of those addicted to the substance. So Dave, can you tell us what was the path that you followed for help? What was the path that finally worked for you?
You know, I think the path is I got a program of recovery in my life. you know, like I said before, nothing changes if nothing changes. You know, and I was told I needed to change one thing in my life, and that was everything. I needed to change, you know. It all started with kind of just like where I lived. You know, I was always going back home, and I was just doing the same thing. And I like to say, you know, when I got clean and sober, I had back problems. Right? I wanted my car back, my money back, my life back, my family back. And I'm based on instant gratification. Like everything I ever wanted when I was using was just, you know, a syringe away, or a drink away, or a pill away. And so when I got sober, I'm like, well, I want all these things back, you know, but I had no patience to work for them. So I would just give up, you know, and I would go back to whatever it was I was doing before, you know, until one day someone said to me, they said, you know, think of it as like a puzzle, right? You got a puzzle that's 50,000 pieces, and you take this puzzle and you dump it all on the table, and you throw the box aside, and you try to put this puzzle together, and you're gonna fail time after time, and because it's overwhelming, right? You got all these pieces. You know, what am I supposed to do with all this? You know, and then you know, so then the person said, well, have you ever asked for help? You know, guidance, and I said, well, no, you know, and so why don't you try looking at the box, like the picture, because that's what most people do, right? So, you know, so he did that, and next thing you know, 50,000 piece puzzle is done within a half hour, completely finished. And you know, they asked, well, how did you do it? You know, and I said, well, it was easy. I asked for help, you know, and they said, what was the help? And they said, well, to look at the box. And they said, well, what helped that? And I said, well, the picture on the box. I said, what was it? And I said, well, it was a man standing inside of a world. And I just kind of worked on the man first, and then the world kind of fell into place around it, you know. And that's what it is. If you try piecing everything together around you and not work on yourself first, you're going to fail time after time. But as soon as you start working on yourself and making yourself whole, then things around you start falling into place. Family will come back, they'll get a little trust in you. Maybe you'll get a job, you know. Just small baby steps, because when we try to overachieve and overaccomplish, it's just kind of, maybe sometimes it's too much, you know. It's all just one day at a time.
Right.
You know?
And we're really lucky here in the West Bloomfield community because we have Maplegrove Center. So Lisa, tell us a little bit about what services are available for families and addicts at Maplegrove.
Okay, so Maplegrove is located next to the West Bloomfield Henry Ford Hospital on the same property, but you can't see it from the road. We're set back into the woods, and we have all sorts of treatment there. We have detoxification services where in a medically supervised environment, the drug can be taken out of the body. They treat the very uncomfortable withdrawal symptoms that Dave talked about. Right. So we have inpatient treatment for adults ages 18 and up. Then and they stay for detox, and some stay longer for stabilization. While they're there, they get individual treatment, education, groups, they get meetings, they have recreational therapy, yoga. They learn about the Big Book, which is the 12-step program. They attend meetings. It's a really comprehensive program. We also have for adults and adolescents an intensive outpatient program. What that means is that they come back to us 3 hours a day, 3 days a week for about 6 weeks, where they also get the individual treatment, group, education. They get family counseling as well. And that is for anybody who is motivated to maintain their recovery after they have been discharged from an inpatient program. We also have early recovery groups. That's for people who who need the additional support after completing another program. It's about an hour and a half once a week to meet with a therapist and other group members to support the gains that they've made and deal with early recovery issues. We have a substance abuse education class for teenagers and their parents who need to learn about addiction and their risks. Maplegrove hosts 12-step programs for all sorts of different addictions, including alcohol and other drugs and gambling. We also have support programs for family members that are free. It doesn't matter if you've never had a patient at Maplegrove. We have on Tuesday and Thursday evenings, starting at 6 o'clock, a skill building class, which is 6 different sessions that family members can learn about addiction, and we use the word family loosely. It could be boyfriend, girlfriend, partner, fiance, whatever. And then followed by a family support group called SHARE, where family members literally share their experiences with one another.
So it's really safe to say we have a really large resource pool at Maple Grove.
We do, and if anybody has any questions about what we offer, they can certainly call our front desk or call me, and we'd be happy to help them out.
That's great. So I have one question, Dr. Feld. What are some of the long-term health effects and ramifications from people who overdose on heroin?
The overdose itself, besides the immediate concerns about life, now you start going about the physical problems of withdrawal.
Right.
I know it's been alluded to a couple times, but not so much the overdose, but now the pattern of abuse and really neglecting your health in general, not taking care of yourself, doing those things on a daily basis that you should be doing. Right. We see a lot of infections, both in the skin, blood, back, heart, which can have all sorts of long-term effects, kind of a slowly progressive decline in your overall health.
And Dave mentioned a gentleman he met when he was in jail who was 100 pounds. Is that characteristic of people who are heroin addicts?
You will see that, again, for the same reasons that people just don't take care of themselves, with the kind of the sole focus of where's that next high and how can I achieve it.
Okay. Chief, can you tell us what the community's doing to get the drugs off the streets?
Well, in the West Bloomfield Police Department, we're trying to be very proactive regarding this issue. We're fulfilling our traditional roles in enforcement and investigation. We have a detective assigned to a DEA, federal DEA task force. We have a detective assigned to the Oakland County Narcotics Enforcement Team. We're in a collaborative effort with the Farmington Hills and Novi Police Departments, what they call the South Oakland Narcotics Intelligence Consortium. So we have a lot of investigative enforcement, but we know that we're not going to investigate, arrest, and prosecute our way out of these issues. It has to be more of a global approach, and anyone that just looks at that one component and say, just arrest them, just put them in jail, that is never going to solve these issues. Right. So we look at also being partnered with Maple Grove, with Henry Ford, with groups like FAN, so that the community educational approach is out there. Yes, it is sometimes too simplistic to say, just say no to drugs. When this is so dominant in their lives, and again, it's controlling and directing them in every decision that they make, you just can't say no, you just can't say stop. So it has to be more of an approach, this multifaceted approach where they get the support services. And again, sometimes if they have a law enforcement intervention and they get that big anvil dangling over their head, sometimes that'll force them into that course of treatment. That really is sometimes the only thing that's going to save their life.
Right. What's the Operation Medicine Cabinet program?
Operation Medicine Cabinet, we look at one of the reasons that people, as Dave alluded to, this gateway process that they go into using drugs. It starts with the addiction and abuse of local prescription drugs, either things that were prescribed to them for perhaps a short-term medical issue, or something that they steal from a loved one, their family, their grandmas or their parents, or they go to their friend's home and they steal it. Well, we want to encourage the community when they're no longer using those prescribed narcotics to get rid of them. Well, look, the environmentally correct thing to do is not just to flush them down the toilet or throw them in the trash where they have a landfill. Is so 24/7 you can come into the police station and drop those drugs off, and then they get disposed of in a proper way. So many police departments there participate in this Operation Medicine Cabinet, and that's what that is. It encourages people to come in, dispose of those narcotics, in the hope that it helps keep them away from the abusive segment of the population.
And Lisa, can you talk a little bit about some of the coalitions and the groups that are in place to also get the word out?
We have a very active drug prevention coalition called the Greater West Bloomfield Community Coalition, and among many other things, they bring programming into the schools to teach children what we would call life skills, all different topics related to growing up in our community. We also have parent forums for parents who want to be educated. The coalition also runs a program called Kids in Charge, which is a substance abuse education program in the elementary schools of West Bloomfield School District, which has been ongoing for 25 years to educate our kids about substance abuse. We also have a program in Oakland County called the Alliance of Coalitions for Healthy Communities, and that is the umbrella organization of 15 different drug prevention coalitions in Oakland County. And they have recently started a group called FAN, Families Against Narcotics, which I'm going to let Dave speak about.
Okay.
Yeah, FAN, Families Against Narcotics, or FAN, was started about 7-8 years ago in a small town called Fraser in Macomb County. And, it happened to where there was 2 fatal heroin overdoses that happened within about 2 weeks of each other, and that was kind of like the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back. You know, so everybody gathered in a church basement across the street from the high school, and it was police officers, parents, principals, teachers, superintendents, and it was just a shouting match and a blame game. You know, it was, you're not policing your streets good enough, you're not teaching your kids good enough, you're not parenting your kids good enough, and it was just who to blame, because no one knew how to handle the problem, what was going on. So then, you know, young recovering addicts, you know, stood up and said, why don't you let us go and talk, you know, to these kids, and let them know, you know, what it's like, you know, because then it kind of reverts back to like the dare and the just say no, and that's how FAN got started, and it's good because, you know, some of the FAN meetings you go to, some of them are pretty gut wrenching. You know, you got family members, parents, mothers who either have lost a child to a drug overdose or has a kid still out there, you know, and then they'll hear someone, you know, they'll see someone like me or some of the other young guys that are in there, or young girls that are in FAN and that are in recovery, and these parents will look and they'll say, you know, they'll see a lot of their child in us, and they'll say, you know, that's like a hope that they want. They're grasping onto any hope that they possibly can get, and it's maybe my son or daughter or grandson or whatever can do it too, you know, and FAN's a great way to get networked in, you know, and now FAN being in Oakland County, you know, it's an awesome thing, you know, because now we're just growing exponentially across the state, you know, and eventually maybe in other states too, and that's just it's just a positive thing that's spreading that more people need to know about, you know, because a lot of people are just lost, or they don't know where to turn or what to do, you know, and I'm sure Dr. Feld gets in the ER, what do I do with my kid next, you know? But, you know, it does start in the medicine cabinet. But it's a great organization, and a lot of the information can be found online, you know, so it's
really great that we, again, have so many resources that people can take advantage of.
Absolutely.
So I think a lot of people watching might be interested to know, how long have you been clean?
About 2.5 years.
And how do you maintain your sobriety?
Just having a program of recovery in my life, helping out other people that are going through what I've gone through, and just, you know, it's just kind of, I just turned a mess into a message, really, you know, that's just really what I did, you know, so it's just doing it one day at a time, and remembering that I'm only, you know, a drink or a drug away from going back. A lot of people say they're afraid of their yets, but I know for me it's the agains that I'm afraid of, because if I pick back up, it's all going to happen all over again, and it's going to get 1,000 times worse, you know, and all I know is I have a day of sobriety ahead of me, you know, and I just do it one day at a time, and just, you know, keep doing what's working for me, you know.
Have you found any long-term issues, you know, that have come into your life because of drug addiction?
I think when you say a long-term effect, you know, I don't have any physical health effects, you know. You know, because a lot of people that are using, you know, intravenous drug users will share needles, or they'll use dirty needles, you know. And I never did that, and I was one of the lucky ones that never had any, you know, blood diseases, Hep C or AIDS or HIV. I think the only long-term effect I have is, you know, the consequences of my criminal activity. You know, I did acquire some felonies on my record, you know, which maybe one day can be cleared up through the legal system.
So Lisa, do people ever really get cured from this disease?
There is no cure for addiction. However, people do go into recovery, and I believe that there is, just as Dave exhibits, there's plenty of hope with this disease. People will, if they work a 12-step program, they can go on to lead very happy, productive lives.
Dr. Feld, what is the worst worst overdose you've ever seen in the ER?
I would say the ones that never even make it to the emergency department. You know, there's, you know, at that point hope is lost, and someone has passed away, you know, prior to coming to the emergency department.
Dave, Do you have any friends who have died from addiction or drug overdoses?
Yeah, you know, I don't. When you kind of use the term friends loosely,
right.
you know, but you know, at one point in time, I think I went to something like 14 funerals in under 2 months. You know, just acquaintances or people that I've known. You know, I've known a lot of people, and you know, and the reality of it that people need to realize is that I've known plenty of people that have been in recovery. I've gone to their funerals because they thought they could have just one more.
Right.
You know, and that's the biggest thing of doing it one day at a time, because everything that I have and I've learned and I've gained back over the you know, these few years, it'll all fit in a syringe or a shot glass just like that, you know. So I just know that I have to take things one day at a time, and I'm grateful to be, you know, a willing member of, you know, a program of recovery rather than a non-willing member of the Michigan Department of Corrections. Because if I pick back up, that's exactly where I'm going to end up. You know, just another number with another prefix, you know.
I'd like each of our guests to share their final thoughts with us. Lisa?
I would like to share with our public that if you are concerned about someone, we have a free program on a Saturday morning once a month called Are You Concerned? It's a good place to start if you're concerned about a family member. If you are a person who's concerned about yourself, you can always come to Maple Grove for a new patient evaluation to determine exactly what type of help you need and what's available to you.
Dr. Feld?
I think the importance is understanding that this is a community problem, and then by the time you've got to me, in some respects it's already too late, and the earlier we can engage members of our community in talking about this and understanding that this is really a big deal in the community, that it's really going to help out a lot.
Chief Patton?
I just like to encourage people not to give up. Sometimes we see the media around, like we make these presentations, you'll see some online comments, they brought it upon themselves, and what are we wasting any resources for? Well, all these lives are valuable. Even if they're not one of your immediate loved ones, they're valuable. So don't throw in the towel. You know, we're, you know, guys like Dave and those like him, we're rooting for you. We really are. We want you to succeed, because there is light here that you can become a productive member of the community again. You won't be committing crimes, and it makes all of our lives that much better, because there is hope and recovery, and that we are actually, we're actually rooting for you all the time.
Absolutely. Dave?
I think the biggest thing is that, you know, addiction doesn't discriminate, age, race, gender. It can happen to anybody, and I've seen a lot of people that have had that, you know, you brought it upon yourself attitude. And then next thing I know, they're turning to me for help because someone they love is going through it, you know. And it's just, there's so many great resources that we have to utilize, you know. And I just think that, you know, just never give up hope. And you know, if you would have asked me, if, you know, back in, you know, in my depths of my addiction, if I'd be sitting here with the chief of police, a doctor, and, you know, and a therapist at a table, I'd say you're nuts. That wouldn't happen. But that's just the benefits of recovery, and it's just people helping people, you know. And you know, I just want to thank FAN and the ACHC and West Bloomfield for letting me come on here and like I said, and turn a mess into a message.
We appreciate that. I'd like to thank Dave for sharing his story, and thank you to Chief Patton, Dr. Feld, and Lisa Kaplan for joining us today. For more information on this topic and prevention, you can visit us at gwbcoalition.org or civiccentertv.com/keepingwatch. I'm Amy Strauss, and thanks for watching.